You are listening to Single Serves. My name is Arno Martire and I am your host. Single Serves is a podcast dealing with design, architecture, business, and city building in which I interview an expert on a specific subject matter. Together, we dive into that topic and challenge conventional thinking in a thought-provoking conversation. For our inaugural season, we have some great guests lined up, and you can expect to hear about such topics like social media for architects, organizational culture, criticism in media, and architects not practicing architecture, among many others. I sincerely hope that you will find these conversations as engaging as I did and learn a thing or two in the process. Don't forget to send us your comments, criticism, and praise. To do so, you can email us at hello@rvltr.studio or leave a comment online. You can also subscribe to the podcast on our website at rvltr.studio. Matt Rubinoff is a creative problem solver and the founder of Stackt. Beginning his career in marketing and communications, he later shifted his focus to real estate and marketing with Tusk Global Limited. As president, he developed a clear vision for an interactive public space that encourages community connection, which eventually turned into Stackt. Stackt is a unique marketplace occupying vacant land in downtown Toronto, aimed at connecting brands, people, and delivering experiences that keep evolving. Matt envisions the concept of Stackt popping up in other locations, and the genesis, present, and future of places like Stackt is what we will discuss today. You can learn more at stackedmarket.com. It's STACKT market.com. So thanks, Matt, for being on the show. It's a great pleasure to have you.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So let's jump into questions right away and tell us who you are and what you do in 3 sentences or less.
So founder of Stackt. I get involved with many other things, but I have been putting quite a bit of focus and time into Stackt recently. And so basically everything from the day-to-day operations from it and looking at sort of what the bigger picture and future opportunities are.
That's great. So I want to go back in time a little bit. And what in your early career would have led to the development of Stackt in terms of your experiences and what you learned and things like that?
Yeah, I think probably a little bit of creative thinking and thinking outside the box. Always kind of looking for solution mode and how to do things probably a bit differently is definitely what could have probably led me down this road to Stackt. The number of things that kind of come into play, and I think the main 2 key pieces of my background is one being real estate and the other one being marketing. And Stackt is definitely an exercise in both of those fields as they come into play quite a bit.
And so where did the original idea come from?
Originally, I was actually working more probably on the real estate side with it, have some background and experience with real estate in Costa Rica. And we were looking at a hotel project actually in the area. And just due to a couple of factors with it, we were actually looking at a modular build and came across shipping containers as a good way to actually accomplish what we were trying to do from the modular aspect and give us that flexibility if we ever needed to sort of pick up the buildings and also kind of reduce some of the construction time. That project did not proceed with it due to some land, some of the challenges we faced there. But during that process, learned a lot about the modular building options and definitely more about shipping containers. And from that and really kind of exploring more around what the modular piece allowed, it gave me an opportunity to circle back to what we probably originally were looking to do as a hotel project in Toronto. But it solved one of the main challenges, which was the cost of purchasing land, which is obviously very expensive in Toronto and can be out of reach. And so all of a sudden it gave an opportunity to look at leasing land if we were able to, move the asset at the end of the day if required. And so that opened up a few more opportunities within Toronto and what we could do. And so came back full circle to Toronto and started looking at land opportunities in really sort of prime locations with this short-term aspect in mind. And it wasn't necessarily around the hotel piece. Now it kind of shifted and was more about taking on retail, food and beverage, and more about a community space involving some other components with it from we're aiming from everything light manufacturing, to event spaces and some other things. So that's where it all kind of came about.
So from what I know about you, I think it's fair to say that you're passionate about public spaces and community. Why is that so?
I've been in Toronto from an early age. I moved when I was 2 years old to Toronto. Really always enjoyed the city. Definitely think there's opportunity for growth and things that we can improve on. I lived really close to where Stackt is now for several years, actually just up the road in there. And it was an interesting area because when I was there, I was just north of it, and where Stackt was very had a very sort of industrial focus to it, and there wasn't much use happening with that land. And then looking for spaces around, there seemed to be sort of some gaps that were there, and not so much of a focus on these public spaces and for places for people to gather. And so when the opportunity came up with this, there was opportunities with much smaller lots that would be probably focused in different ways on sort of how they would be built out. But when the opportunity came up with the lot we are on now at Front and Bathurst, it was the size of a city block. And although right away we recognized we didn't need to cover the entire lot with containers, but the opportunity that would exist with all of that space surrounding them, in the end, we're about a quarter of that lot, 25,000 square feet, is covered with containers or buildings, but 75,000 is outdoor space. And that outdoor space is such a key component to what we're doing with Stackt and how it helps enhance sort of everything else that we're doing, and becomes really a key component. So yeah, everything from just in Toronto, more, the need for more spaces like this, seeing some great other examples around the world of different sort of spaces like this, and seeing a gap in Toronto where there didn't seem to be too much of this type of thing that was happening.
It seems to strike a nice balance between commercialism and the need to generate revenue and more community-oriented space. How do you strike that balance?
Yeah, it's a fine one for sure, and so it's an interesting conversation when we engage with brands and businesses out there, and a lot of them right off the bat will ask, where can I put my brand? And if you come by Stackt, you'll see it's very limited on what that branding opportunity is. We control that, and we control it for a couple of reasons. One is a level playing field we're looking for. So we have a mix of established brands, from international and national brands, right through to local entrepreneurs. And although the majority are local entrepreneurs within the space, they are there with some of these more established brands. And you could say that a shipping container is an opportunity to just be a massive billboard for a brand if they wanted to splash their brand around. And, the more established brands can afford that, to do something like that. Well, the local entrepreneur can't. So one is to level that playing field, to make sure that everyone has equal exposure and opportunity there. And the other one is purely aesthetics, to make sure it's not turned into brand Disneyland of colors and brands all over the place in there. So aesthetically, it's something we control as well. So when you do that, you need these brands to figure out another way to engage with consumers and people and tell their story. And that's what we do, is we push them to do that. We help them to do that. We look for them to engage with the community in a different way. So that's whether they're testing a new concept, they're going to do it through programming, whether they're going to collaborate with other brands, and ways that we can bring their story to life differently outside of just throwing a brand up on a container is how we look to do that. And so I think that's where we find that balance and look to sort of build that authenticity with these brands and have a really good connection with people that are coming by the site.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Do you have maybe one or two examples, or shining examples of that? This kind of different way of promoting brands that's been very successful or appreciated by the public, or both?
Yeah, there's a number of different ones. I mean, if a brand is looking to come in and they say, we'd like to take a unit, and first thing we do is we try to get them thinking outside of their four walls. How can I think about not my, I have 500 square feet. How am I thinking outside of that 500 square feet? And how do I take advantage of the other 100,000 square feet that exist at Stackt? That's one thing right off the bat we'd like to do. And so if you start to think that way, some of the opportunities that exist is there's a lot of programming that we do at Stackt, some that we generate and create internally, and others where we bring in third-party events and programmers that come in with things that they're doing. And so where is there something that aligns there for a fit where they can get involved and start to do some things that will tell that story outside of their space is one piece of it. Where we have them focusing. We have a podcast studio that was on site, and now we have another that's now coming into the works with ISO Radio, who just launched with us this month on there. And so, how could you use that if I'm in fashion in a fashion brand that's come through, and I want to tell my story about sustainable textiles or something in that nature of that story? Here's a great opportunity to do that, and then can I do that with the podcast studio on site to help tell that story? How can I now engage with some programming outside of the space? There's a lot of opportunities like that we push, and kind of each one's customized. There's not really a set menu where we say pick option A, B, or C. We look at each brand. We figure out what they're trying to accomplish. Is this all about brand awareness? Is this about testing a new concept, a new space? What are they trying to achieve from this? And once we figure that out, we can bring them, have them kind of engage with some of these opportunities in a different way.
So you mentioned early on that creativity was a big part of your life, and I think it shows in the way you talk about opportunities you're looking for your tenants and partners. And I think that's great. How does, if you can disclose this, how does Stackt make money? Like, is it rents? Is it events? Is it a combination of those things? Is it other things that I haven't thought of? Can you give us kind of a little bit of a rundown of how does that work and how you keep it profitable?
Yeah, it's there's a number of different things that happen, and each one's kind of unique. So there's no set way with it, really. I mean, there's everything from rent that would come through from tenants in what you call sort of the retail units or the showrooms. We have event spaces that are on site that are in there as well. There is activation opportunities with certain brands that would like an outdoor footprint, and there's sponsors and partners that get involved. And yeah, each one, is unique for sure. And there's a big food and beverage component as well, to the site as well. So, we've got a kitchen, an incubator kitchen for emerging chefs and concepts that we push through and want people to test through there, and some other food opportunities. And I may have mentioned we have a brewery on site as well. So, that kind of covers off from that industrial and manufacturing component of it. As well. So there's some unique partnerships that come into play as well from a revenue standpoint.
Yeah, it sounds like the only thing you're missing is residential.
Yeah, it is right now. There's that is the gap.
So if we go back to the genesis of Stackt, how challenging or not was it for you to make it happen?
It would be tough to say it was an easy one. It was. It definitely took some time in the planning process. I mean, it's funny because the idea of a modular build is, modular is not necessarily cheaper. It's faster, or it's meant to be, and that was the approach that we wanted to take with it. And I think just through the planning process, some of the complications that come with leasing land over short term and building this out. There was quite a bit of work, obviously years in the planning process. I mean, funny enough, the containers went down very quickly. The containers were down in under a month time, and could probably be done much faster than that. And we have 120 containers on site, maybe even 130 now, that are on site. So that part actually happened really fast, but there is quite a process leading up to it. And that's everything from the planning standpoint and going through everything that the city requires, and something that's unique. It usually takes a lot more time, and anything different and new. There's far more questions that people have and things that need to be answered. So everything from a permit and process standpoint there, and then also the idea of bringing on these partners and tenants and everyone in that sense. It's a different conversation where it's a different approach, and we're selling a concept basically out there. So you're working off renderings, and the first thing people hear is we're going to take over a city block in downtown Toronto, and we're going to use shipping containers as the the buildings, and not everyone is familiar with shipping containers, or have they necessarily seen examples of it. That could be, aesthetically pleasing or interesting, or do they understand the story? So right away that could, it's probably intriguing to everyone, but it can throw some off pretty quickly. So you have to kind of build this vision, and that's a longer process as well. And lucky enough, we had people that just saw it, got it, and decided to jump in with us, which was great, but it definitely takes a bit of time.
What would you say was the biggest hurdle or challenge?
There's a number of things. I'm not sure if there's anything particular that stands out now to me, more kind of in the moment, and maybe, what just became a bigger barrier or something that we had to get through. If I looked at it from the stretch of time, the planning and the process of going through that planning process from like a building and permit and site plan approval type of piece. If I looked at that, just because the time it takes, that probably was one of the main pieces that I would say would be it, not necessarily as a challenge. It wasn't somewhere where we had to get super creative all the time, more just probably on the duration that we faced for that piece of it, because timing is key, especially if you have a land lease over a certain amount of time. Delays are really costly and can be a big problem. So you need to move fast and get it going very quickly. And so anytime there is that delay, that becomes a pretty big challenge.
Speaking of timed lease, I believe last time we spoke, the market was to be until 2021. Is that still the case, or is it going to stay longer?
Yeah, so we have our first extension, which is great news for us, and so right now there is plans to be there for a couple more years in there, which is great. It's been good. I could say it's been well received, and there's been some great accolades that have come out of it. I was really sort of everything really proud to see we were awarded Public Space of the Year last year, which just really offered kind of some validity to what it is that we're trying to accomplish and do there. And I think that also is getting noticed, and there seems to be some great feedback from the community on it. So I think all of these things help, towards some of those things. But again, there's a process involved with everything and how that all works. And, like I said, I'm happy to see it, and hope we get to see some more length in the term as well.
Yeah, well, congrats on the extension. That's very exciting. So you opened Stackt almost a year before the pandemic. How was that first year for you?
It was an interesting one. We opened up. There was a lot of excitement. It was well received. We sort of took a more natural kind of organic approach from a marketing standpoint. We're about discovery. Every time people, sometimes when everyone comes down, they're gonna see something different. It's always evolving. And we just wanted that naturally to happen. And it was good. It got traction right away. And we saw a lot of people coming down, which was terrific. A lot of learnings from it. We were doing something new, different. We kind of take that approach. We always say that, we're open to failure. And I don't mean failure from the standpoint of Stackt can fail, but components of it, can we test something through programming? Could we test a different food concept? Can we, are we willing to take a chance on a brand that, we just aren't sure is going to be successful? And that's always something we're ready to test out. And because you can do it with something like this. So with that, a lot of learnings, we listened a lot before building Stackt, but we're always listening ongoing and as you open. So you listen, you learn, you adapt and make some changes as we go. I feel like it probably took about a year to start getting our feet under us really well and understand, okay, this is what I think, our happy place here and where we want to be. And literally right at right before the first year anniversary came up, along came the pandemic. So that was year 2, and it was like starting all over again from an operational standpoint. It was very different. So yeah, just as I think we were getting our feet under us with it of that year, but it was an interesting first year for sure, and a really interesting second year.
So what exactly happened during the pandemic? What changed, and are those changes permanent, or are you gonna go back more to normal as things reopen?
Pandemic was interesting for us. I mean, if anyone said, if you were, I couldn't imagine that on anyone to say, you're going into a business that has some key components in retail and hospitality, not where you want to be in during a pandemic. But what became really interesting is what we had built with Stackt takes a different approach. And a few things I think were really important is one, the outdoor component. So the fact that we had 75,000 square feet of outdoor space came really important. And that's, a public space for people to enjoy. And, we're over 20 murals that are on site now outside. There's a lot of spaces for people who can go around and enjoy those. We did a partnership where we hosted Design TO in January, and they were on site so people could safely come to the site and see installations and different works, but behind a glass wall within a unit. And people were looking for things to do. So having that outdoor component became really important in there. And then the next sort of piece that we saw was really key was, Stackt was built to address sort of a shifting landscape in retail. And I believe there's always going to be a spot for some of the larger stores and the longer term leases. But, we saw an opportunity where there was a need for short-term, small spaces, really flexible lease terms, an opportunity for brands to go and test these things out. Some of those brands I mentioned who, if we're not sure if they're going to see success, how do they feel? Are they coming out just to test something and see that for themselves? They may not take that risk. And there's landlords that probably don't want to take that risk out there, but we're able to take that and support them. All of this, was what Stackt was built on pre-pandemic. This was the way we kind of saw everything happening. And so I don't know if it's that it became more relevant with pandemic or just more evident that these things are some key factors. And it was interesting. I mean, we did a lot of different things, but seeing people enjoying the space like that, I mean, we looked to see some of the numbers of how many people were actually coming to Stackt. I think the months that were the most sort of surprising and were really nice to see was, I think, in January and February. So, middle of winter, very cold. I believe at that point we're in full lockdown within Toronto and not much to do out there. And the numbers we were seeing of people that were still coming to the site was incredible. And so that's people who are looking to get out and do something different, whether you're walking your dog or, just going out for some exercise and, trying to do something different or meet someone somewhere. And, I think some of that art component, the spaces around just, were there and again, offered validity to what we were doing to see how many people were enjoying that space during a time like that. So back to your question with it, I mean, we definitely shifted on a number of things, but what we had built seemed like it was set up for this type of thing. And we didn't have to all of a sudden sort of shift the whole model around how we look at, leases or partnerships and different things like that, which was great.
So it sounds like the flexibility of it enabled you to navigate those murky waters a little better.
Yeah, it helped for sure.
So outside of the pandemic, because we've talked enough about that, how do you think overall, before, during, and after, Stackt has influenced Toronto? Both, I guess what I'm getting to is I'm interested in, one, the impact on policymakers and maybe giving them a different perspective on what can be done with the city, not only at your site, but elsewhere. And how do you think that's going to influence the city in the future, if at all?
I mean, that's something, I'd like to hear feedback from others. I'd love to hear your feedback on, I would hope that it's had a positive impact with some of that process. I know, we have a relationship with the city, not just from the experience of building that site, but we also lease the land from the city of Toronto. And so we are in discussion with them quite a bit and with different divisions of that city. And it's definitely interesting. I think as we proposed the idea at first of, so this is the concept of what we're doing, it was probably a difficult one to understand because it was going to be a bit different. And it's nice to hear now that there's a lot of support around it. And I think that comes from, it's now everyone sees that once you do what you say you're going to do and all the opportunity that comes out of that from employment and community space and programming. And, we've seen in the 2 years we've been open, including a pandemic, we've seen over 1,000 businesses come through the Stackt ecosystem through there, which is wild to think that over 1,000 businesses through there. And so many have come and tested different things and went on to open up permanent locations in places after they saw that success. Many of them actually ended up signing on long-term leases with us, and all kind of were in there in a different way and sort of touched that ecosystem. And this stuff, helps obviously in those conversations, and it's maybe we don't say it enough, and it's just sort of naturally trickling through. And I think with time, people recognize that more and more. So as they do, we hear that their people are happy and supportive of the project, but whether or not it's influencing policy making decisions, that's a tough one. I mean, during this process, I believe there was kind of an approach to the city of Toronto that was approved around modular building, and not necessarily because of us or shipping containers. A lot of it would probably come be more relevant through to the housing side and the residential component and looking for solutions there. But they did approve that, and that's the funny thing. Modular building has been around for ages, but it's not something everyone's necessarily familiar with. So I think it's a huge opportunity. And as we see more and more of that, modular can also work better when where it's being fabricated. The proximity to the location can also become a factor of where it's going to end up. And so once you start to see more of that, factories and things where they're building modular closer to, within the GTA, it's going to open up some opportunity there. And that's happening. You're starting to see more and more of that occurring out there. So, did we have a play in that? I know to a certain extent because of conversations and questions that have come back to us around that and in the process and what we did with modular. So I would like to think and hope, but I'm not sure how far it goes.
Yeah, that makes sense. So are there any projects yours or from other people that are in planning or have happened or you know of that we're going to see in the future in Toronto and elsewhere too, but specifically in Toronto?
Specific to modular?
No, like this kind of community marketplace type of project, like public space, similar to what you've done with Stackt, or has that caused people to want to emulate what you did?
I hear there's a number of projects similar to us that get proposed. Whether they come to fruition or not is, I'm not sure how far they make it. And, I know we weren't the first ones to go in and even propose a shipping container project. I mean, there's great ones that exist in Toronto before, like Scott and Cord and a few others. And I know on the scale that we did it, that we weren't the first to come in. I just think there was probably a lot of challenges right away once that's proposed and what you hear and what comes with that. So I do hear of other projects, whether they'll come to life or not, I'm not sure. And more around that shipping container component. Outside of that, and just, terrific ideas around public space and, creating these community spaces and places for people to gather. There's been quite a bit over the last bit that I've seen that I've been really happy and impressed about. And maybe these ones are highlighted even further because of the pandemic and the importance of these spaces, whether they were accelerated or, pushed through a little bit quicker or someone decided this was the time or not. If it's pandemic related, I'm not sure, but hopefully that is something that's come positive out of pandemic is, more of these proposals coming forward. So yeah, there's, I think, a lot of talk around the waterfront and different areas that we're going to see. Obviously, transportation has been a huge piece. We're seeing some leaps there, and we won't see all the results anytime probably soon, but at least that, planning, and you're starting to see, holes in the ground and things happening from that standpoint, which is going to help access to these spaces and a number of things because, in the downtown core and stuff, there's very limited space sometimes. So, but people are getting creative.
What about you? Do you have any future plans of your own or what's the next thing? Is it, or if there's one at all?
It's been an interesting one for sure. I mean, there's been since before opening and as we've opened, we get some interesting phone calls and opportunities that are out there, and some local, some, well beyond, some international opportunities that are out there. So it's definitely nice to be noticed there and thought of, which is great. At this point, I think I would have been entertaining them more if it wasn't for the pandemic. And probably really specifically, the reason is like I said, I wouldn't entertain another one until I felt very confident from an operational standpoint. And that, I would say it would be a minimum a year. And after that year, started to feel comfortable. And the pandemic was just a different experience. And operationally, it was just, it turns a few things on its head and you need to take a different approach. It was like starting all over again.
Yeah.
If anything, again, comes positive out of that, I feel like in 2 years, we've probably taken in 10 years of experience from it. So I feel like we've seen a lot now and learned a lot from it. So yeah, back to your original question, I would say at this point, probably entertaining other opportunities more at this point. But nothing I can say, is too far down the road where I'd be able to say, yeah, it's, here or there or something specific that we're looking at.
Yeah, fair enough. I think that's all for the questions I have for today. So I want to thank you very much for your time and your generosity. It was a great interview, and hopefully we can have more of those conversations, maybe 2 years down the road once you've had that 10 years experience.
Definitely. And thanks so much for having me.
Well, you're very welcome. Hey, Arno here. I hope you've enjoyed this episode and that you'll come back for more. Please share with your friends and colleagues, and remember to subscribe on our website at rvltr.studio. Until next time, ciao.